Hello and welcome to LB Loxley's Wildlife. David Harasny has a real passion for wildlife. In fact, he has rigged his garden with cameras to capture all the wildlife action, including live cams on the internet. He calls himself Camo Dave, and the other day I had a chat with Camo Dave to find out more.
How many kinds of sweet flowers grow in an English country garden? I'll tell you now of some that I know, and those I miss you'll surely pardon. Daffodil, heartsease and phlox, meadowsweet and lily stocks, genteel lupin and tall hollyhocks.
Hello Dave, and thank you for coming on to the show.
Hello, LB.
Could I start by asking you what gave you the idea to set up Camo Dave in the first place?
Camo Dave came about when I first started getting back into birdwatching back in 2007. I'd visit my local park that catered for bird watchers, and I was the first person to wear the Rio Tree camo gear. I was late one day and one guy said, "Where's Camo Dave today?" And that name stuck then, that nickname. Later in the year I visited my friend Dave Cully of Sparrowhawk Island in Cheshire. I'd look at his setup of his live streaming cams. He had 25 cams at the time on different parts of his garden, on nests, on bird nests and that. And I said to my partner Jackie at the time, if he can do it, then so can I, but on a smaller scale.
So how long have you been running the site for now?
My site, Camo Dave's Wildlife Garden, has been set up since late 2011. It's had quite a good following of visitors to my site now, and it's still going strong.
So how many cameras do you have and how do you monitor them?
I have 25 cameras situated around my garden, some in permanent positions, others that can be moved around throughout the time of the year depending on what's going on. I can then, put a camera onto a blackbird nest or a dove nest, a robin nest. 16 of these cameras are then fed into my DVR system in the house. That is then fed into a monitor so I can monitor all 16 cameras at once. Another part of the cable from the DVR is then fed into my laptop, which is then fed over the internet through live streaming so people can go online and look at the cameras online and see what's going on throughout the year.
What sort of costs are we talking about in your setup?
You can sometimes start off with around £40 for an S-Box camera. I started off with one, and then it got so addicted that I ended up with getting 25, as you know. The costs vary from £40 to up to £100. The HD ones and the IP cameras are then a lot dearer. They go up to the hundreds of pounds. That's if you're really serious about that. My DVR system that I use for all 16 cameras that I use in the garden cost me about £500 just for that one box. And you've got to think about the cost of streaming live over the internet and things like that.
Is there much maintenance involved to keep everything working?
There is quite a bit of maintenance when it comes to wired cameras. The cables can be open to the elements, rain, sleet, snow, hot and cold, and within a few years I think the cables wear down to where they need replacing because your pictures start getting distorted and they aren't as sharp as usual. The same thing goes for the cameras. If they're not in nest boxes, they're open to the elements as well. The worst part is rain. The water gets into the cameras, they stop working, they start malfunctioning. I try to waterproof my cameras by cutting a 3" by 1" piece of plastic out of an old pop bottle and using that, putting that over the top of the camera, then wrapping insulation tape around that. That sometimes keeps the water out of the camera, protecting the top and the back.
So tell us about some of the wildlife that visits your garden.
Considering where I live, in the middle of a very large village, I'm surprised at what wildlife I get in my garden. Mine is the only one in our street that has trees, bushes and lots of cover. It draws in insects. Every other garden around me is either patioed, got decking, gravel, The edges have gone and been ripped out and put fences in, which doesn't bring in the insects that the animals and birds need. Like I said before, I am surprised at what I get in the garden. I've had siskins, red poles. I get redwings in the winter, goldcrests, great spotted woodpecker, nuthatches. I've had tree sparrow. Not only that, I get nighttime visitors as well. So I get foxes, badger, and hedgehogs.
That's quite a variety, Dave. How do you encourage them to keep coming back?
I know food plays a big part in attracting wildlife back into my garden, but I also think it is essential to have cover, things like trees, bushes, creepers, like my garden has. My garden is an untidy, messy sort of garden. I don't mind that. The wildlife certainly love it, but that's what wildlife, like. Most gardens nowadays consist of decking, flagging, gravel, meaning most people just want a low maintenance garden. Most of the hedges have gone and been replaced by fences. The most essential part of what wildlife need is a hedgerow. Let me just go through what's in my garden, even though mine is quite small. I have made the most of every bit of my garden. I have several different types of trees: sycamore, alder, hazel, elderberry, ash, rowan and evergreens. Most birds like evergreens. They have a rich supply of insects from these trees and bushes, which brings them even more into the garden, especially in the breeding season. Large shrubs like Contoniaster canubias, great for attracting winter thrushes to the garden to feast on the berries. Pyracantha, spiky climber, that also produces berries for winter. In the summer months, I also sow wildflower seeds in a 10-foot by 2-foot strip of border to attract butterflies and bees. They love this throughout the summer. This is what I think is very essential to any wildlife garden. Every garden should also consist of a pond, no matter how big or small. I also have a water pool that is about 1.5 inches deep by 2 foot by 2 foot in diameter. This is a great success, attracting birds to drink and to bathe. The best thing I have ever put in my garden for wildlife. Now let's think of how to attract birds and animals into anyone's garden. I use premium sparrow mix, which consists of millet and sunflower hearts. The majority of birds will eat this. House sparrows love it, and I've had up to 100 plus feeding in my garden at any one time. Just one word of advice though, of any of the listeners that go out and buy cheap seed from a local shop or store. Most of these bags consist of 80% of seed that no bird will touch and will go to waste. You will find that most of the seed in these bags is grain, and very little birds eat grain. Other foods I use in my garden consists of fat balls, suet pellets. I go for the insect and berry suet pellets, which I think go down the best with the birds. All kinds of birds love them, from blackbirds to robins to house sparrows. Not only do I feed the birds, but I also feed the nighttime visitors in my garden, like the foxes, badger and hedgehogs. I've fed a variety of foods, from cake, dried fruit, grapes, peanut butter sandwiches I should say, raw eggs. I've never known a badger not to like peanuts like the one that visits my garden. After him visiting for so long, we decided to call him Bert. We also put food out for the hedgehogs in the way of mealworms, and we also give a rich supply of water for these animals. Never give milk to hedgehogs, as it's not good for them. Last winter we had hedgehogs hibernating in our garden. Bird boxes are also a good addition to any garden. I have 17 around my place. It's also good to have a couple of feed stations. I have 2 in different parts of the garden, and are placed 10 to 15 feet away from cover, so no lurking cats can get to the birds, but close enough for the birds to dive into if a sparrow comes through the garden.
Well, thanks, Dave. There's some really helpful hints and tips there, how to encourage more birds into your garden. So, how wide an audience do you have? For instance, do you get viewers from overseas?
My website, Camo Days Wildlife Garden, has drawn in up to date 101 different countries, and there's been total of 49,000 hits on my site as to date. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with how many people are getting drawn in and watching the live cams and reading what I've put on there as well.
What sort of response do you get?
I've had quite a few email contacts via my website. People asking me where's the best place to situate a bird box in their garden, what size they should have, how to encourage wildlife into their garden. I do have a hints and tips page on my website where people can get inspiration from. But if they need me to speak to them direct, then I will email them and contact them directly.
How many insects come here and go through an English country garden? I'll tell you now of some that I know, and those I miss you'll surely pardon. Fireflies, moths and bees, spiders falling from the trees, butterflies sway on the cool gentle breeze. There are hedgehogs that roam and little gnomes in an English country garden.
In an English country garden.
It seems to me that apart from being very entertaining, this is a great way of monitoring the wildlife that visits our gardens. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, LB, as you very well know, wildlife is entertaining and addictive. I know you with your hedgehogs, but with the cameras, you never know what's going to happen from day to day. So it's opened me up to a whole new world, having cameras. This year we had a blackbird nest in the garden, and without the camera we wouldn't have known that the male was helping out by adding a bit of material to the nest and shaping it. It's very rewarding watching birds lay their eggs, rear the chicks, and eventually fledge the chicks, which is very hard work for the birds in question. I get a lot of satisfaction out of watching my live cameras, and you're always learning something new that you wouldn't have seen. Like for example, at night time I wouldn't have seen a fox in my garden, I wouldn't have seen a badger in my garden, I wouldn't have seen hedgehogs coming and feeding in the garden, right at my back door, if I didn't have cameras.
Now, if someone listening thinks they might like to have a go at seeing what's in their garden, what advice would you give them about getting started?
The best advice I can give out, LB, is to buy one camera to start off with. Handycam.com do a great variety of cameras at good prices. They're helpful. If you're not sure what you need, they'll help you out. Simple enough, the cameras just plug into the back of a TV, and you can sit in your own comfort of your lounge watching the wildlife in your garden, blue tits nesting in a nest box. How captivating is that? And all I can say is buy a low quality priced camera, start off small, and if you get addictive like it is addictive, watching wildlife, progress onto a bit more dearer camera, and then quality cameras like HD and IP. The more cameras you have, the more wildlife you're going to see.
So do you have any special wildlife moments that stand out that you would like to share with the listeners?
God, there have been several special moments in my wildlife garden watching everything that goes on. While I seeing a sparrowhawk catch a bird for the very first time, my heart was thumping, and it still does today every time I see this. Another special moment was when a buzzard landed in the tree at the bottom of my garden. I was in the bedroom at the time, and it stayed in there for a few minutes. Then it flew out, heading straight towards the window, and banked to the left at the very last minute. That was awesome. Other exciting times is listening to Tawny Owl at night in the garden, hearing it hooting and screeching. I kept one ear open all night when I was asleep to try and listen for it again. Seeing a bullfinch for the very first time on the feeder in the garden, even though it only stayed for a couple of minutes, that was still nice to see. I think some of the special moments are having birds nesting in the garden, watching them gently feeding their chicks and seeing those chicks fledge. But the most special moment of all time was when I put out a homemade bird cake. It had vanished overnight, leaving a few crumbs. So I thought, I'll have to put a trail camera up, thinking it was a fox. So I set the trail camera up and put out another homemade bird cake. When I woke up the next morning, I went downstairs, got the card out the trail camera and watched the footage back. thinking it was a fox. I was so excited, I called my partner Jackie from upstairs down to watch the footage. To not see a fox, but to see a badger. There'd never been a badger in this garden the whole I've lived here, 45 years. Thought that would have been a one-off. The early hours of one morning, I heard a commotion in the garden. I had left the shed door open, where the seed was, and I could see the badger clawing away at the plastic bag, ripping it open to get to the seed. It tried to get in through the cat flap as well that night. Thinking about this, I started putting food out and set up a camera on record to watch this footage back the next day. The old yes, it came, and it came for 6 months. Brought another badger with it. The first badger, Barry, so we called him Barry the Badger. And the second one kept coming, so we thought we'd give him a name as well. Then Bert the Badger, because they were both males. My friend came and knocked to my door one morning and said, there's a badger dead across the road from your house. Went across and looked down to find that it was Barry, the older badger. Picked him up, came across the road, into my garden, and I buried him at the bottom of my garden. But Barry will always be with us. Bert still visits today. Bert comes nearly every night, has a good feed, is happy to be here, and I love having him here as well. Don't think it's right for people to tame foxes so they feed out the hands. These badgers are wild animals and should be treated as such. What's stopping those animals from going up to a complete stranger that doesn't like wildlife? What could happen? 3 visiting foxes. We get Bert the Badger, and we have 4 hedgehogs as well that come visiting and feeding every night.
If anyone wants to see your live cams or some of the wildlife you have filmed in the past, how do they find you?
Any listeners out there want to view my website and watch live cams, just visit www.camodave.co.uk. You can also access my YouTube page from my website to view any of the old footage over the years from all the wildlife that's come into my garden. You can also get the link to my Flickr page to see pictures. You can also contact me via my website or chat to me on Twitter or Facebook through Camo Dave.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Dave, and thank you very much for coming onto the show, and all the best for the future.
Thank you, Olby. It's been a great pleasure to be on your radio show today. Yeah, I've enjoyed every minute of it. Hopefully we can speak again sometime in the future.
I'm sure we will.
How many songbirds fly to and fro through an English country garden? I'll tell you now of some that I know, and those I miss you surely pardon. Babbling, cuckooing doves, robins and the wobbling thrush, bluebird, lark, finch and nightingale. There is joy in the spring when the birds begin to sing in an English country garden.
In an English country garden.
Robin,
Robin, Robin,
don't forget the robin.
don't forget the robin, Robin,
Robin,
Robin, Robin.
don't forget the robin.
My thanks to Camo Dave. And if you would like to see some of Dave's footage, live or otherwise, there will be a link to his website on the 10 Radio Facebook page. And that's it for me.